miss me, and that's fine, because the stars of the day are who we mustn't miss. We ready? Everything is live? Fabulous. Excellent. So we have all of our panelists here today. I would like to welcome everyone to the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at the Aga Khan University. Those of you joining us online, I hope that after several years of practice at living these hybrid lives, you are able to generate that visceral sense of presence. You are all with us here in spirit, if not in body. Firstly, I must thank my colleagues in the library, the FAS library, and of course the Faculty of Arts and Sciences for their tireless efforts in bringing these stimulating and thought-provoking talks to fruition. Until you've actually organized this kind of event, I don't think you really appreciate just how much work these are. Anyone who's an academic and they've delivered the seminars, they may be forgiven for not realizing just how much work goes in behind the scenes. Like many things in life, when they go well, we're completely oblivious to how difficult and challenging they are to bring to life. And I don't want my colleagues here to think for 1 second that I don't appreciate what they do. They make a tangible contribution to bringing the FAS to reality. The Faculty of Arts and Sciences is an ambitious, even audacious dream. AKU is daring to dream in a world that can be better than it is. We've done this in other domains. In healthcare, AKU has transformed the landscape by raising standards that have saved lives. In education, AKU has professionalized teaching practices and demonstrated that the Global South can and does aspire to the same learning standards of the best educational countries in the world. With the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, AKU is taking bold steps towards addressing practices and standards in leadership that are detached from specific vocational pathways. Our students and our faculty will be an exemplar of the finest research and teaching in the world, and our graduates will develop that critical thinking and broad knowledge base to make substantial and sustained positive contributions to the most intractable national and global challenges. Today, we come together to celebrate the next generation of scholars. I have said many times, and will no doubt say many times again, that early career scholars, be they students or doctoral students, doctoral researchers, or freshly doctored scholars, are the lifeblood of any institution. As a dean, I don't believe I'm past it, but I no longer have the luxury of focusing primarily on the latest research debates in my field. I keep up with the latest scholarship by reading my students' essays, by supervising research students. They do the heavy lifting of filtering what's hot, what's not, and what I need to read. That allows me the luxury of concentrating on the most salient topics, the most salient readership work that is having the biggest impact. But it is a mistake to narrow one's reading in that way. It diminishes our intellectual horizons and it starts shutting down the possible. Early career scholars haven't yet developed these bad habits of cutting corners and judiciously skim reading to learn enough to sound like you know what you're talking about. They still read every page of a book. They still read every word of an article. They don't just go to the table of contents, read the introduction, and then skim read the index for the key bits of evidence. We need early career scholars to keep us honest, to keep us pushing the envelope beyond where we did 20 years ago. I'm thrilled to be able to moderate a panel of 3 very impressive young scholars who I am confident will help everyone understand the challenges, the frustrations, the excitements, and indeed the passions of research. 2 of our panelists today are working on their doctoral research. One of them has recently completed her doctoral research. Dr. Zoya, who is joining us online, is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History at the University of Chicago. Faiza Rahman is a PhD candidate in the Department of Middle Eastern and South Asian Studies at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, but also one of her supervisors is here in the audience based in AKU, our own founding dean, Anjum Halai. And Sohail Ahmad is a PhD candidate and research associate in the Institute for Educational Development here in Aga Khan University. We invited these 3 early career scholars because they have demonstrated excellent scholarship in the social sciences and humanities. So I now want to invite each of them to, in 1 minute, basically introduce themselves, tell us the working title of your thesis dissertation or the completed title of your dissertation thesis, and then we will launch into some specific questions. But first, Zoya, can I start with you? Can you basically introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Hi everyone, and thank you to AKU FAS for organizing this. Like Stephen said, I'm a teaching fellow in the Department of History at the University of Chicago. The title of the dissertation that I defended last year was The Scatter of Empire, Prostitution, Law, and Trouble in Colonial India. And I'm basically a historian of gender, law, and empire in the context of South Asia. So my dissertation really was an intersection of colonial, legal, and gender history that tried to understand how South Asian women responded to laws concerning sex work and sort of challenged and confronted empire in a way. And I can talk a bit more about that going forward, but that's basically the short intro for now.
Thank you very much. So Faiza, can you do the same, please?
Thank you. So thanks for inviting me here. My PhD is in Islamic Civilization Studies. That is the graduate program I belong to. And in addition to that, I have a graduate certificate in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. So my project, the title of my project is Islamic Period. So period actually is the euphemism for menstruation. I work on the very controversial subject of menstruation, how Muslim women understand their menstruating bodies and how they derive different tenets of faith, different clauses of Islamic hygiene to create practices of menstruation in their everyday life. So that's what my topic is briefly. And that's
fantastic. Yes. So I believe you have your own microphone. Last but certainly not least, Sohail, please.
So my name is Sohail. I'm currently enrolled in doctoral program at KUID, Institute for Educational Development. I basically am from Mardan, coming from the Mardan and alumnus of this institute, IED as well, and MPhil program. Now in PhD program, my working title, which is just taking shape, is the Teaching Quality of Research Methodology course in higher education across Pakistan, where basically I'm interested to see what's happening inside the teaching research methodology classroom, how teachers, faculty members are engaging students in teaching learning process and methodology course. And along with that, I'm also interested to see what are the institutional arrangement leading from department to HEC for promoting the quality of teaching practices in higher education.
Okay. And we're going to come back to that. So thank you very much. I want to start the first question. I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask, and we will open it up to the floor so we get some questions from you as well, or comments. I want to start with Zoya. Now, you've been through the process. You now have your doctorate. What I would like you to do is kind of expose a little bit of the ugly side of research. What didn't work? We all read the published articles and we see the finished, smooth process where we actually don't hear what didn't work. So I'd like you to share with us something in your research that you actually couldn't overcome, and how did you deal with it?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for me to think through this as well. I think that there's the proposal stage, which is when you become a PhD candidate, and then there's the defense stage, and quite a lot happens in the middle. So I proposed a topic that was similar to what I ended up with, which vaguely concerned sort of the sphere of law, laws pertaining to prostitution in particular, but also and the British Empire in South Asia. However, a lot of the history you end up writing depends on the archival access that you have. And so one of the big challenges, first off, was that as a Pakistani citizen, I can't travel to India in order to access sort of colonial state provincial archives in India. And so that's a big loss, because largely the archives in India are very developed and have a considerable degree of documents that you can't access in other parts, particularly Europe and London, for example. So one of the ways in which that was also addressed is that I tried to do as much as I could in Pakistani archives. So I spent time in the Punjab archives, the Sindh archives in Karachi, which is a great archive. I briefly even went to the Balochistan archives in Quetta. And so I might have sort of gotten access to a smaller set of documents in that from within South Asia. However, these were sort of documents that no one would have had access to because very few people come to Pakistan for fieldwork. So that was one, I suppose, positive, that I was compelled to do so much fieldwork in Pakistan. And I think in India also is now digitizing quite a few archives. So there was that access in that regard. I was also very fortunate to have sort of the funding to be able to go to Europe, to be able to go to the UK, which is where a large chunk of colonial resources are. So in that regard, I think developing my topic in relation to archival finds, that was a challenge, but that's something that every historian who is sort of doing a graduate degree will have to contend with. The other challenge, as you know, Faiza will also know and Sohail will also know, is the actual process of writing your dissertation. I think there can be quite a lot of blocks in sort of moving that process forward. The most difficult thing is writing your first chapter, in my opinion. I think once you're sort of across that hurdle, then things somewhat become easier. And actually, I found writing the introduction to the dissertation quite challenging, because you have all of these sort of chapters that you've written, and then you sort of have to make them cohere, put them together, like make them seem as if they're a symphony through an introduction, and that can be quite challenging, because you're sort of your project might have developed in a bottom-up way, but you're having to sort of put it together in a top-down way with an introduction. So I think particularly the end of the writing process, while you seem very close to the finish line, you know, can also be quite challenging. But I think that, again, these are things that, you know, get worked out through the actual act of writing and sort of forcing yourself to sort of address these issues. But those are just some things that come to mind. I can come back into the conversation after you know, Faiza and Sohail also speak.
Thank you very much. I think I rewrote my thesis introduction at least 4 times, completely 4 different chapters. Faiza, let me ask you now, you've already alluded to this, that it's a sensitive topic. So this is something I think many of us in anthropology in particular, we're dealing with living people. We're asking questions that often push the boundaries of what people want to talk about or are comfortable talking about, or even if they're comfortable talking to you, they're not so comfortable with you necessarily then doing something with it. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you dealt with dealing with a topic that other people find controversial, and actually, you know, your own feelings about that controversy.
Right. So thanks for bringing that up about the nature of anthropology, which, you know, as one of my professors say, that anthropology is about constantly being uncomfortable and sitting peacefully with that sense of discomfort. And that is something that, you know, I've had to acquire, being uncomfortable by discussions of sexuality, race, all of these things, and just, you know, being patient with yourself and just being very humble enough to understand that, you know, there are things that we don't understand, there are things that infuriate us, but knowledge and truth and all these things are beyond our feelings at that particular moment. Anyway, that's how I schooled my own self into my topic. And it wasn't also easy for me to start writing about menstruation, because I had a lot of my own cerebral barriers over, you know, the subject of menstruation and talking about it in public. What took me to write about it is, firstly, if not to sort of, I don't know if this is blowing my own trumpet, but like at one point it was just unadulterated courage. It was just like, I'm going to do this no matter who says what to me. And it took a very long time. I didn't come into the PhD program with this topic. I changed my topic several times. And finally, I was like, I'm going to do this. And when I'm presenting this topic on menstruation, it depends on the audience. Often I don't openly use the word menstruation when I'm introducing my topic. I say things like I work on how women understand bodily hygiene. I study concepts of taharat and pakizgi in an Islamic concept, in an Islamic context. So my purpose isn't just to present myself as a scholar, but also to draw the audience in. So if I just, you know, if you just turn off the audience immediately by saying something that is offensive to them, I don't think that is culturally relativistic. And I think that it doesn't really serve me also as an anthropologist. We always have to be sensitive to the audience also. So depending on the genre of the audience, I've changed the framing of my topic to give a more sort of nuanced or subtle presentation.
And I imagine, if I could just follow up on that. So in my own field work, there were some areas that, even though they weren't sensitive to me, they were so sensitive to the people that I worked with that actually those just sit in my notes and don't go anywhere. I actually do ring fence them and say, okay, I'm never going to share this with anyone. They just die with me. Did you encounter anything like that? Stories that you think, okay, that's for my personal knowledge and I can never share it because it would upset the people too much?
Yeah, there have been so many of these moments. Actually, when I was doing my field work, while I was at EKU with Dr. Halai, in field work, there's always a thing, you ask them one question and they say something, and it happens a lot with women because women don't talk in that very rational, directed way. A lot of them say a lot of things, and then I'm just like, I'm going to put this at the side, and this is going to be my second project. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Sohail, I think we're not dealing with the same kind of sensitivities with your project, but we're dealing with a different problem of unintended consequences. Because you're dealing with something that is very policy oriented and it has a potential to genuinely impact people's lives in the next 3 to 5 years. So how do you, as a scholar who is producing, bona fide, good, high quality research, kind of reflect on and control the potentially negative unintended consequences of the results of your research?
Okay, so before coming to this question, so I will try to take a step back and see in education how we come up with the topic, how we means my supervisory committee and myself, we decided the topic. So we were too much sensitive to the idea in terms of choosing the right methodology, in terms of defining the worthy research questions that can actually help in responding to the policy and practice, not only to the policy level, but to the practice level as well. Because what we understand is that our research and education, okay, so particularly like I'm working on the quality. So like particularly when I'm working on the quality, so the term quality itself is very sensitive, and when you are sharing the results and with the audience in any public forum, so people and when the results is not in favor of those who are the policy makers, so they must show a strong resistance, and they can actually say, like, they actually can challenge your research methodology, they can challenge your tools, and they can raise questions despite the fact that they must be aware about the ground realities, but they may not be accepting. So these are the possibility with and we have in the mind, and particularly when we are talking about the quality and higher education. So the most important challenge before going into the after 5 or 4 year consequences, the most challenge what we are seeing is to seeking or getting entrance into the classroom and a university. So when you go into the classroom, the professors may not be allowed, particularly in public sector universities who are teaching for years and years, and we as a researcher, we access to that classroom, and we asked if we want to see, like I want to see what's happening inside the classroom, so they may resist. So that is during the PhD consequences as well. And post PhD, like when the findings shares, so the possibility of not accepting the results, not accepting the
Can you give me an example of why would somebody reject the results? What would motivate them to say, I don't believe Sohail?
Okay, so recently that we have like the experience, we conducted a study and across Pakistan, and I was a team member. I was assisting actually the research team. So the result was not in favor of the teacher education program. So those view of the people, the stakeholders, the key influentials who are in that discussion dissemination ceremony. So that simply raise questions on the research instead of accepting the realities on ground. So perhaps that I think the issue is that uh, we are not equally convinced to accept our failure. We may not have like the courage to face the reality when it's against our assumptions, and they are the policymakers. They have to defend their own policy and their own initiatives, so they may reject.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to switch now. This is an open question for all three of you. Each institution has its own character, its own quirks and oddities. You've all had to learn your institutions. I think, Faiza, you've had to learn more than one institution. You've had to navigate both AKU and Emory. So I'm really wondering if you could tell me a bit about the role of your supervisor in helping you with this, in navigating these quirks. My own supervisor was fantastic. He would spend many hours just telling me the gossip of my university, of my discipline. He'd tell me who had arguments with who hated who came from a working class background, who came from a posh background. He filled me in on the personalities of the world in which I was planning to inhabit as a professional academic. And I'm internally grateful to him for doing that. I'm wondering whether you think that is something a supervisor should do, whether your supervisor did it, and whether it's at all useful, that sort of information. So I will let you have a bun fight and figure out who's going to answer first.
I can get started on that question. I think that one of the things I think that's also shaping the relationship between a supervisor and advisee is also the number of advisees that a supervisor will have. I mean, I think in the past there were far fewer people getting PhDs than there are now. Now the problems are somewhat different. There you have more people getting PhDs than there are jobs, at least in sort of the in the job market in North America and Europe, at least. So in that sense, I think that the sort of that sort of canonical close advising relationship where your supervisor just takes you under their wing and sort of trains you and guides you to that degree, I think that's still present in many institutes in the US, though I think it's changing more and more. So in my case, I had a fairly good relationship with my supervisor, who's a Indian historian, now sort of a post-colonial theorist of sorts. However, it wasn't the close advising model that Stephen you might have experienced, because it was a very hands-off relationship in a way. I went to my supervisor when I sort of needed something to be activated. I needed feedback on an idea. I needed to sort of refresh certain parts of that interaction. And so from my perspective at the University of Chicago, how I used my committee was kind of up to me. I went to them when I needed to. Now, there are obviously committees and supervisors who will be very active in following up. And some of my colleagues had those advisors who were constantly sort of asking them for updates about, okay, tell me about your progress in terms of research, in terms of writing, and so on. But there is a sense in which, because I went to, and Faiza probably has a different experience because there may be fewer graduate students in the department she's in. My department at one point had around 150 PhD students. And so it's a huge history department. There are other, like the anthro department at UChicago is sort of smaller, but for some reason the history department is rather big. And so it's you have lots of sort of faculty advising many students, and so it's really about the space you carve out for yourself in that context, and sort of using and sort of being proactive with how you use institutional resources, institutional events, faculty, and so on. Whereas I know that at least at Emory, the Department of History takes far fewer PhD students per year, and it may be that a supervisor might just have one student or two students at a time. And then you have that relationship that Stephen, you're also alluding to a bit more. So this is just a perspective that may be a bit different from others, but in my case, it was more of a hands-off relationship with my committee, but it actually benefited me quite well because that's what I needed. I sort of don't, as a researcher, I don't love close supervising. I like to sort of do things at my own pace. So it worked out in the end. However, you do have to sort of manage your own progress a bit more proactively.
I should say my supervisor stopped talking to me for about a year. So I had very close for the first year, and then he got angry and washed his hands of me for a while, and then forgave me and was okay again. But it was a up and down ride. Faiza, I'm very curious to know how you navigated both Emory and AKU, and whether you see these institutional kind of demands, whether it was difficult for you to learn how to operate within an AKU context as opposed to an Emory context, or I mean, bearing in mind that your supervisor is in the room, so we're not going to be criticizing anyone here, but I'm interested in your comparison of the two institutions.
Well, in AKU, I didn't really have my intellectual training per se as AKU. AKU was my institutional support and to sort of make sure that my fieldwork was going on according to the ethics. So here, I didn't really have to navigate any structures per se, apart from, Dr. Halai, who was really at the forefront of all the institutional matters that who to talk to, and she would usually be telling me. But with other things, when you do your PhD institution, where you get your classes, where you do your exams and your prospectus, that is a different story. It's like the whole, I mean, what can I say? So my advisor is, I have a lot of friction with him. I still do. And we keep fighting over everything all the time. And I like that. Because for me, if I have a peaceful relationship with my advisor, I feel like something is wrong. So if you're not having a conflict with your advisor, there is a problem, because you should be having that kind of conflict. And the other thing is that, academia and doing a PhD is really not about being very smart or intelligent. I think it is about being extremely smart with in a political sense, in a very political sense, who you talk to, how you write your emails, how you how you present yourself. A lot of that is very important, and that is what I often tell new PhD students who come in, who come and ask me for advice. I don't know how this might sound to people, but it's a pretty well-known fact that you have to be very, very smart bureaucratically in different ways, in dealing with different people, in dealing with different offices of the institution. So that's what my advisor also told me, that it isn't just about how many books you read. Firstly, have a very, very kind heart, and secondly, be very smart with how you talk to people. That's one way of dealing with it. The second advice that I always give people is that your advisor is not your sheikh. You're not in a khanqa where your advisor is your Sufi master and you have to be under their tutelage. No, it's not like that. Your PhD is your degree. Make sure you democratize that authority. Never give a lot of authority to your advisor. You talk to committee members, talk to other professors, talk to other graduate students, have allies in different institutions. Make a lot of people are going to be writing your letters. A lot of people are going to be giving you feedback. So your advisor isn't somebody you should be scared of. Your advisor isn't running the show of your life. You are doing that, and make sure there are many people who you can talk to at any given time.
And can I say, as someone who hires people who've just had their PhDs, that's the character I'm actually looking for. I'm actually looking for someone who is ready to be independent of their supervisor and can stand on their own 2 feet, because otherwise, as a head of a department or as a dean, I wind up being a supervisor, which is the last thing I want. I want my faculty to just do their job. So excellent advice. Sohail, I think you have, of the people on the panel, you have a slightly different institutional experience. Your institutional experience has been entirely here in Pakistan at a private university, which is unlike many other units. It's a unique university. I wonder if you could share your thoughts on how you navigate the institution here and what you think might be different about doing a PhD in a private Pakistani university as opposed to a state university or a foreign university.
Well, this is very interesting questions, and that's the questions many times people ask from me, that why you have opted for AKU, why you have opted universities within Pakistan for PhD, why not abroad? So it's these questions always helps me to reflect on some merits and demerits of being within the host country or pursuing PhD abroad. So both have positive and negative aspects. The strong positive aspect is when you are in a local university that is providing you a quality compatible with international standard, then you have your supervisor, the people surrounding you, they have very strong and rich knowledge about the context, and whatever idea you come up with. They have very rich familiarity with the context. So it's not easy to dodge them easily, and they always challenge you. So in two terms, first is relevance of your research and depthness of your research in the context, and the second thing is their own understanding of theoretical knowledge or expertise in that field. So I was lucky enough to have like such I was in fact privileged to have like international sort of supervisors and supervisory committee members while staying in my home country. uh, on contrary, like pursuing PhD and abroad, that has also a lot of benefits in terms of grooming and skills learning. But the one thing which I often feel is could be possibly that when you are working with a supervisor who is not familiar with the context, then you as a student become the expert of the context, and you can say like, so all things are not even good enough being documented. Our own observations and experiences that also matter a lot while we are deciding or refining our research. Now, when I'm comparing like the same scenarios within the Pakistani context, so interestingly, my own research is I'm curious about the uh, quality, and I'm much sensitive to the quality. Uh, when I was making this decision, so uh, unfortunately or fortunately, AQ was the only university that I was satisfied with in terms of quality and the facilities available within the AKU. So I think.
I mean, I should say there are other good universities in Pakistan,
but in the field of education.
In the field of education, exactly.
Education, and my own expectations, like expectation from any universities that what that university can offer to me during my PhD. So I just formed this only universities.
Okay, and can I ask the role of your supervisor in helping you navigate the what you're talking about, the politics of the institution?
So unlike to Zoya, so I'm lucky enough, or at least I hope it would not be like for my first year. It will be continue till the completion of PhD and even after the PhD. So I have very close interaction with my supervisor. I think you can say we meet every day, not necessarily only discussing our own PhD, but we are discussing others surrounding areas, fields, including politics, including our other field, sub-discipline of education, policies related issues, practice related issues. And somewhere I learned, I read phrase, it said, doing PhD is not just completing your research, but it actually learning how to deal with the institutional politics. And I think in that regard, I'm lucky that my supervisor is training me not only for like enhancing my research skills or polishing my research skills, but how to deal with the outside people outside the academia, how to interact, and what are your goals, how you can pursue with your goals.
Okay, thank you. You look like you want to say something else. Yeah.
Searching. Okay, so that thing was this also reminded me like the power of the question is so what, right? So then the PhD, most Zoya and Faiza must have experience and many other. So you supervisor when asked so what, So that's very simple question, but that's very powerful question, at least for me. This questions was repeatedly asked from me whenever I come up with ideas, a lot of work. And then the simple question was, so what? What is your research question? So that then pushed me back to see, take all the steps aside. And then at the stage, like, so since my supervisor was strong in the context sort of thing, so then we come up with the research question, and we can at least now say that it's worthy research questions to be researched.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to change tack a bit. No research is complete without publishing. We carry out research, we produce primary data. It is incumbent on us as scholars to publish it. These young people are going to be publishing the cutting edge stuff that changes the debates. So I want to ask you, as someone who now is in a bit of a rut, I publish, the way I publish and nothing new, I just keep churning out the same old thing. Tell me, give me advice. What's the future of publishing? What would you advise future scholars? How do you actually refine your articles? How do you turn that chapter into a peer-reviewed article in an international journal? And what support do you think is most useful for an institution to provide people at your stage of the career? No? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, so I am not a very prolific publisher at this stage, publishing person at this stage, because it takes me a lot of struggle to be satisfied with anything that I've written. So that's my enduring problem. It's only very recently that I got a chapter accepted in a journal, and I was really overjoyed. And then my advisor was like, "Oh, finally, this miracle has happened." So I think. What advice can I'm really not in a place of giving advice because I'm so bad at this particular thing myself. It's just that what works is that send out abstracts, be a very have a very hard skin, like a thick skin with rejections, like just I mean, with no offense, but what it's usually said in institutions is that have the confidence of a mediocre white man who is not educated at all. Have a confidence of that kind of person. I mean, not Dr. Lyon.
Oh no, I have way more confidence than him.
So yeah, just be very confident in sending stuff out. What's the worst anyone can do? They can just reject your piece, and that's okay. So that's all I can.
If I can just add to that. Oh, go ahead, Zoya. Yes.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, in terms of pathways to publishing, this is in the humanities, for some reason, there's less sort of collaboration in terms of co-authoring as well. Certainly in history, this is the case. Unlike in sort of other disciplines where you can a lot of people can work on one thing and have many publications because they're doing more collaborative work. So I guess one of the things I'm also looking toward is sort of maybe co-authoring with someone who's doing very similar work to me, and trying to then get access to sort of resources that I wouldn't ordinarily have access to. Another consideration, certainly after you've completed your dissertation, is how much of your dissertation you want to publish, because you might want to, submit your dissertation as a book manuscript, and then a lot of it shouldn't be published if you want it to be published as a book manuscript. So I'm currently, I myself am not published at the moment, but I'm currently developing an article out of one of my chapters to send to a journal for peer review. And then the other thing about journals is there's special issue journals. So you might be invited to submit an abstract for something that's a special theme. I think that can be a really interesting way to get your work across in relation to other authors who might be doing similar work to you. The traditional peer review process might take a lot longer in some journals. I know from colleagues will maybe just keep your paper for up to a year, but while they sort of review it, and then you can't submit that anywhere else. So I guess deciding which journal you want to submit to on the basis of what the period of review is also key. But these are, as Faiza said, you do really have to be somewhat prolific and consistent in actually putting these things forward, because it's no one's going to sort of there's no deadline to publishing in the way that there's a deadline to completing your dissertation. You have to just be very proactive about going out and doing it yourself. So this is also just an encouragement, or rather a motivation for myself to also do the things that I'm sort of suggesting at this point.
Thank you. And of course, Sohail, you do have a deadline, because under HEC rules, you can't get your PhD unless you've published.
So I think first of all, what we need to understand that publication should not be like just for the sake of numbers, as we have like the requirements of different, as a part of different policy of promotions, and even in PhD, HEC also have the criteria. But a true publication should be and must be that can take off the field into some advancement, that can help to understand, help the readers to understand something new that is related to the context or the field. And for that, what I have personally experienced is that it's take a lot of time to bring that sort of maturity in your thoughts and your writing prior to being called as a published author. And for me, I think I take almost 3 to 4 years break and decided not to publish anything, just write and rewrite the assignment and this sort of thing. Along with that, what I found the most effective strategy was with working with the faculty member, writing with them, being a co-author with them. So when you are involved in the process, there are many things that a faculty or the teachers cannot teach you through like the presentation, through the lectures. But when you are involved with them in the process, you by default start learning those things, how to make the connections, how to polish your ideas. Regarding the potentials are the advice for those who are interested in this area of publication. So I must say that there is a lot of potential for the Pakistani or the scholars based in the LMICs, lower middle income countries, because we have a lot of like dirt of literature and different areas, fields, particularly when we are talking about the education field. So and there are some good journals that even provide very good consideration if the researcher has the convincing ideas, arguments in the paper, so they do publish. So there is the possibility.
Thank you. Well, I hear 3 take-home messages there. Learn by doing, have a thick skin, and actually look for co-authoring opportunities. You both said this. One of the great joys of my life is publishing with my PhD students. Right? I really enjoy when we take what they've done and we get a chance to push that into a good journal. That's incredibly satisfying as a supervisor to see that happen. And then you push them out. Yes.
I want to like direct this to Zoya, actually, is that in the humanities and anthropology, history, education, these are book fields. These are fields in which you write books. There isn't much that you can say in a 30, 40 page paper. You really can't make that much of a, elaborate argument. So our productivity is always contrasted and compared with people in the sciences. So, like how many papers you're publishing, or you only have, 1 paper in 3 years. So Zoya, what do you think about that? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, because it is true that when you sort of, depending on the field and discipline and sort of the norm of co-authoring, you may have a lot of publications where you're maybe a second author or so, and it may sort of populate your CV, with many lines. However, I think that's also what makes a peer-reviewed publication in a top journal as a humanities scholar is a fairly big deal, especially if it's single authored, and so it's sort of, and you likely won't publish another article for maybe some time after that. But it's also true that the thing that is being at least what you're advised to do post dissertation is just develop the book manuscript. I mean, the idea also is to sort of try and get an article out, try to sort of just get your sort of name associated with some sort of interesting research, but developing the book manuscript and that culmination is sort of considered sort of more is higher than sort of any other article you may publish or not. So I think it's also just about norms within fields and recognizing that there's, I guess, when you're a single person doing a lot of research in terms of whether it's an ethnography or whether it's sort of archival stuff, I guess there's more effort involved in each piece of in each piece of publication compared to maybe when you're sort of co-authoring regularly or doing collaborative work regularly. So I think that's an important point. I think that Faiza raised as well.
I mean, it is. I would say you're absolutely right. Books in anthropology and humanities, books are extremely important. But I certainly think that there should be a companion article for every book. So when I'm assigning readings in the seminar, I expect students to read the article. And then when they do the essay on that topic, you've got the book. And I've been shameless at sort of scavenging my books for articles. So every book I've written, there's 2 or 3 that have chapters that have appeared as articles. And I will never apologize for that because different people read those. And the point is to get your work read. I really don't care about the publisher's bottom line. Sorry, publishers. I care about my work actually having an impact. And so I think you have to mix it up. Okay, I'm going to stop our questions here and I'm going to open it to the floor because I think we've got a room full of people who either have experience as scholars and know where you've been, or maybe you'll be thinking about possibly doing a PhD and you might have a question for these experts who are fresh in the thick of what they're doing. So I will invite the floor now to ask a question. Yes, please. We have a question up in the front. Professor Halai.
Thank you. Very refreshing to see the young scholars presenting. I have, unsurprisingly, 2 questions for Faiza, because I'm quite familiar with the field work that you did and the community whom you research, but I also have a question for the other 2. So Faiza, the people with whom you did your research in terms of generating data and insights, how would you see your publication and the knowledge that you produce impacting them or going back to them? Because my understanding is that not all of them would be reading a book chapter or an article, especially if it's written in English. So that's one question. And I think that question applies to pole 3 of how do you actually make sure that the impact of your research reaches those very people and communities with whom you did research. Another question for Faiza, you mentioned the Muslim period, the period being having multiple meanings. My question is that women's practices around hygiene, around menstrual hygiene and all of that are not necessarily related to Islam and religion. They may be related to culture, and how did you negotiate that labyrinth in the course of your research? So 2 questions. The first one, anybody could take also about the impact going back to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Halai, for very important questions, and that actually help us to see the relevance of our research and to improving the lives of the humanity. I will respond to what my interest and what I'm doing is to see the quality of teaching, and we all know that's the quality of teaching is directly related to the student experiences. The better the quality, the better will be the students' learning outcomes. So at the end of this research, I'm quite hopeful that it will help the HEC, the universities, to revisit the policy for making or giving enough consideration to improving the quality, improving the teaching status in higher education. Though there is now growing awareness, realization of promoting quality of teaching, just in the case of NAHI, National Academy for Higher Education, which is established by Higher Education Commission, and they are actually offering professional development. They have started offering professional development initiatives for the university faculty. But again, due to the absence of grounded and generalizable large-scale evidence regarding what's happening actually the quality, what's happening inside the classroom, and what are the problem, what can help. So my research will help in diagnosing the problem, and that will be provide the strategies for the NAHI that these are the areas you can provide the professional development. And the third point is like our intention, if we are trying to like develop an observation tool that can be used for observing the classroom, but that tools will be equally beneficial for individual faculty member to use it for as a self-improvement or self-professional development. So that will be and once they start this, so we hope that the overall culture of teaching, learning and higher education will take shape, inshallah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Faiza, this is a really good question. How do you communicate that back to the people you worked with?
Thank you, Dr. Eli. I think both your questions are the sort that they would need like hours to answer, I feel. But no, which I have, but I don't
Not
think
here.
they have. So in anthropology now, there's a whole field of engaged anthropology, which is about, how, I mean, there's been so much discussion about how, researchers like us, we go into these communities, we are almost parasitic in the way that we take information and then we use it to burnish our own very brilliant careers in Western institutions. A lot of it, you have to equalize that power imbalance that is between me, the very privileged woman, and they, the people who are, supposed to serve me with their life stories, which I just take and, write in my. The IRB today in my institution and also my own supervisors, they make sure that no research of that kind is happening anymore, in which you are just listening to people's stories and just using it for your own book. Something has to be given back. That power binary needs to be equalized. So the way I built my ethnographic method helped mediate some of those things. I made sure I collaborated with, Green Star Social Marketing through Dr. Tazeen Ali. I made sure that they were getting some health and medical experts who were accompanying me to those homes where I was talking to women, so that some of their reproductive health and sexual issues could be addressed at that very time through me, through my research. And when it comes to, paying back, or like how would my research affect them? People say things like, how my research is going to go and affect the policy on menstruation in Pakistan in the future. I don't think that will happen in my case. And that is something that haunts me, that, when I write that book, I don't know what it will do to this. So I don't know. Maybe we have to be uneasy about the fact that there is something about academic work, anthropological work, that is inherently still unequal, because we are very privileged, elitist people in privileged, elitist institutions. And it's not just my job as a scholar, as a PhD scholar. I'm in a very precarious position and in a very vulnerable position institutionally myself to make those big changes. I can do small things, which I do, but the long connection between a published book and the people on whose lives that book has been written, that is, I still don't know what I can do to bridge that gap. So there is a conversation with, there are policies, education policies waiting there, there are research policies waiting there. There's only so much I can do.
Even before we get to the policy, what about simply communicating it to, so all of my publications, they're either in French or they're in English. I have nothing, literally nothing in Urdu. So I count on the people in the village to just learn English, right? I go back and I try and explain it to them, but my Urdu is limited. I'm not able to engage in the same level of verbal argument in Urdu that I can in English. So I give them the nuts and bolts, I go back, but then they count on their friends who can read English to tell them. And I'm not sure their friends always do a great job of translating. So how do you do that? Forget about policy, forget about benefiting, just communicating.
Dr. Lyon, that is, okay. I don't think they are interested in what we do. Yeah, that's the problem of us scholars. We think that everybody is so interested in, and as an anthropologist, that is very humbling. You go into the field and you realize that people don't think about what you think. People don't want to talk about what you think. So,
if I could actually just quickly come in on what Faiza also said. I mean, this is also a question within history. So one of the most significant, I guess, historiographical fields in South Asian history is something called subaltern studies. And there was a big question about the degree to which subaltern studies, which was supposed to write history from below, history of sort of the peasant, was actually resonated with how sort of working class South Asians actually saw themselves and understood themselves. So there is, I think we are working with that sort of chasm between the research and the subject in that regard. And as a historian, this is also true as well. It's just that, you know, your subject is kind of farther back in time. But what I just want to sort of quickly, in terms of communication, that you raised, Stephen, and also the Dr. Halai's question, policy is not what I'm thinking of as a historian, because you really have to be doing a very specific kind of history if you want to shape policy. Actually, I do want to privilege communication, because one of the things that with respect to my research, for example, I'm looking at how certain colonial laws try to target and impact the lives of certain groups of women and how they understood that and responded and challenged to that. And it's you know, in this everyday, you know, popular subaltern way. And so one of the things I actually want to communicate, even if it's to a limited audience in Pakistan or a limited academic audience, is that there is an aspect of resilience to colonial history. Colonialism didn't just happen to South Asians, because South Asians actually responded to colonialism by understanding a law and evading it. You know, there's what I want to communicate to whatever audience I can communicate it to, is that South Asians were resilient in response to colonialism, basically. And so I guess there are different ways of communicating that, and perhaps there could be ways in which a public talk like this could also sort of be an instrument of that form of communication. But I think conveying and communication, particularly to South Asians, about, you know, to whom this history will be more relevant for reasons having that it's about them. I think that's an important point to take forward.
Thank you. We have time for one final question, and please keep your question brief and your responses brief, please.
Yeah. So hi everyone. My name is Avaz, and I'm a PhD candidate at George Washington University. And my question would be around interdisciplinary projects. So I mean, I think one of my best projects have been where, you know, there have been scholars from many disciplines involved. However, those projects are not rewarded by our profession. So what would you say regarding that, and how do you think about more public facing and more accessible scholarly writing, because it again suffers from the same problem of not being well rewarded by the different scholarly professions. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Excellent question. Yes, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Zoya, shall we start with you, since you're the farthest away?
Well, it's a very good question, and I don't know that I have a satisfying answer, because I'm very much grounded in the discipline of history, and I don't do, my method does not sort of step very much outside of the traditional historical method of sort of reading archives and documents, though I think there's a bit more oral history that's also coming in. But I think interdisciplinary work, so there's a lot of, and you know, the connects to what Faiza will also be doing, is that there's a lot of intersection of ethnography and history at this point. So there are a lot of anthropologists who will do more history, and there are lots of historians who will do more anthropology. That's not a trend that I can necessarily speak in a very detailed way. So I actually might defer to Faiza in this regard. But I think that sort of the disciplines are just sort of, one should be grounded, I guess, in a methodology, in a discipline, or, you know, at the intersection of something. But I absolutely think that it's key to sort of step outside your own method and sort of incorporate other things into your research. But yeah, I think I might just ask Faiza the degree to which, I guess, history is relevant to her work.
Yeah, and I think Faiza will give you the last word on this. What do you think? Interdisciplinarity.
I actually agree very much with what Zoya has said, that it's very important to be grounded in one methodology and in one field, and then maybe borrow methods from others. So yeah, and history has been very, one of my chapters is like completely historical, and then you need history at some level for ethnography to make sense, I think.
Well, of course, Evans Pritchard saw anthropology as a branch of history. He was wrong, but yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so here you look desperate to say something, but keep it very brief, and then we will wrap up.
So regarding like the interdisciplinary, so when we are, if we are considering it as a PhD doctoral project, so again, I will go with a response with Faiza and Zoya, but there is a lot of potential for the funded project, other than where you don't have any constraint of institutional constraint to complete your PhD in 3-5 years. You have years, you can decide how many years you can complete the project. And that's important, keeping in the local realities where we are in the crisis in almost all aspects. So there is a dire need for interdisciplinary work to address or to enhance the quality of human being.
Okay, I think we have to wrap it up there. So let me please be the first to give you a round of applause. I think I'm just as impressed now as I was when I started. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, the audience. I believe we have some refreshments over in our pantry. I don't know what we call it. We're gonna have to give it a name. The pantry just down the corridor. So please join us there and we can continue the informal conversations. Zoya, I'm so sorry that you can't join us for the drinks and nibbles. Next time, we expect you to be here in person.
Yes.
And then we will regale you with some nice fruit juice.
Yes, inshallah. Well, thank you for organizing, and thank you to everyone who attended virtually and in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.